There's levels to change, there's levels to growth, there's levels to transformation, there's levels to evolution. When it pertains to letting go and releasing, we often hear the saying, it's all in letting go. Because in order to let go, you have to actually be willing to release and let go. But it's not just about letting go, it's also simultaneously about adopting, cultivating new behavioral patterns, new way of thinking, new way of feeling, new way of being and living and perceiving. So it's not just about letting go, it's simultaneously also about what you're willing to change and begin doing. Because you can say, yes, just let go of the old things, but even in letting go of the old things, you simply stopping the old way of behaving is you adopting a new pattern of behavior in your neural pathways. Because your neural pathways is why it teaches your brain that based on the new information, based on the new behavior, you can then begin to adapt a new way of being and living, doing and perceiving. But also when it pertains to actually adopting new ways of being or change, it's a two-sided coin. Yes, one side is letting go and releasing, the other is cultivating something new, something better. Even you simply stopping the old pattern of behavior is you teaching yourself, teaching your being to cultivate something new. But I'll say this as well. What stops a person from cultivating a new way of being and living when you're presented with new information, new truth, new facts? It's something we know as cognitive dissonance. But what is at the root of cognitive dissonance? It is a familiarity to clinging to the old. It is a resistance to change. When you resist change subconsciously and even consciously, when you're presented with truth and facts and then your behavior doesn't align with the new information, the new truth that you now have, it is because you're clinging to familiarity. Because growth can be perceived as uncomfortable. Here's the thing, change for the better, growth for the better, and being comfortable don't go together. No, you don't have to be in discomfort, but you have to be in a certain level of uncomfortability when it pertains to changing and growing. For example, you want to build muscle, you work out. It's always comfortable, right? You want to learn a new language, right? You begin learning, right? It's not always comfortable, but that's the thing, right? You want to change up something that you see that isn't quite right in the world, right? You begin doing new things. It's always comfortable. When you're seeking change for the better, and you're seeking being comfortable in the old pattern of behaviors, it doesn't align, it would not work, it's a congruence, right? So what causes cognitive dissonance? It's a clinging to familiar, the old, and a resistance to change based on our experience. And this affects how we feel emotionally, and this affects how we think. It's all interconnected. The brain, the mind, and your feelings, it's connected. What's going on up there will affect how you feel. You could be listening to a certain song and thinking certain thoughts. What happens? You feel some kind of way. So thoughts and emotions go together. It's about using your mind, using your brain to rule your emotions in a way that your emotions don't rule you, you rule your emotions. But what I'm saying is this, right? Based on the experiences you have, when you're presented with new information that's based on truth and facts and doesn't align with your old way of reviewing, your old worldview, your old perception, right? And you're clinging to the familiar subconsciously, even unconsciously, that's why you cannot change or do better, because you're clinging to what's familiar, you're clinging to what's comfortable. To truly change, evolve and grow and be better and do better, you have to be willing to release clinging to the familiar and clinging to what's comfortable, because that's the only way you can actually transcend cognitive dissonance and transcend being stuck in a pattern of behavior that doesn't serve you and isn't actually right morally, ethically, etc. It's by being aware that yes, you can be aware of how you feel about things or how things work, but when you present it with the truth, you should be able to receive the truth, look at the truth, and then do better. And what stops you from doing better? It's when you cling to the familiar. Cling, even though you know it's not true, it's not right, you still cling to it because you're familiar to that, you're used to that. But being used to something doesn't mean it's actually the best way to be or best way to do it. And being comfortable doesn't mean you're always in the right place, right? Being comfortable doesn't equal to actually stability. It doesn't equal to growth. Comfort, in that sense, is actually the opposite of what actually required for evolution, transformation, and growth. Yes, everyone wants to be comfortable, but that level of comfortability, in a way in which you know things are not quite right, but you stay comfortable because it's not familiar to you. You stay in familiar knowing of what's not quite right, what's not quite true, what's not quite right, whether it's ethically, morally, or even personally. When you cling to those way of being and living and you resist change because you don't want something unfamiliar. But to grow and evolve, you have to adopt new ways of being, new ways of thinking, new ways of feeling in your life and your human experience. And that's the only way you can truly create change, evolution for the better, that's aligned with truth, aligned with progression, aligned with growth, aligned with evolution. Have a great day.